Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries hide in the most ordinary places. In the sweltering heat of an Alabama summer, the government surplus auction buzzed with the usual crowd of military collectors and scrap dealers, all eyeing retired tanks and weather satellites. Elena Vasquez clutched her last $20 bill, watching wealthy bidders casually drop thousands on Cold War relics. When the auctioneer dragged out what looked like a battered space shuttle hull, calling it some old NASA training mock-up, the crowd barely glanced up from their catalogues. Elena saw something different: the metal composition, the unusual joint seams, details that didn't match any shuttle design she remembered from her days as a NASA physicist. $5, she called out, her voice barely audible over the murmurs and chuckles. The auctioneer shrugged. Sold to the lady who clearly knows a bargain when she sees one. As Elena arranged for transport to the old hangar she rented with her last savings, whispers followed her. Poor thing doesn't know junk from treasure. If only they knew that inside this junk lay technology that would rewrite everything humanity believed about space exploration, and about who else was out there, watching. What Elena discovered in that hull would either save humanity or destroy the only life she had left to protect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The reality of what she'd done hit Elena 3 hours later, as the flatbed truck groaned to a stop outside Hangar 47, a rusted monument to better times when Huntsville's aerospace industry thrived. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete who'd seen stranger cargo in his 40 years of hauling, scratched his head as he surveyed the shuttle hull. Lady, you sure about this? That thing's got to weigh 15 tons easy. My crane can get it off the truck, but getting it inside. He gestured at the hangar's narrow doors. That's gonna be creative. Elena pulled out her phone, checking the time. 2:15. Sophia would be getting out of summer day camp in an hour, and she still had to pick up her waitress uniform for the evening shift at Mel's diner. The familiar knot in her stomach tightened, the same one that had lived there since Marcus left, since NASA downsized, since her PhD in astrophysics became as useful as a philosophy degree at a truck stop. We'll make it fit, she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The doors are wider than they look. Pete shook his head, but fired up the crane anyway. As the massive hull swung through the air, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing some invisible line. The shuttle's surface was pitted and scarred, painted in a flat gray that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the Alabama sun. Up close, those joint seams looked even stranger, welded in patterns she'd never seen in any NASA manual. 20 minutes of careful maneuvering later, the hull sat in the center of the hangar like a beached whale. Pete collected his payment. There went another chunk of her dwindling savings, and left Elena alone with her $5 purchase. The silence pressed against her eardrums. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight streaming through grimy windows. She walked slowly around the shuttle, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. From the outside, it looked like any number of training mock-ups she'd seen during her NASA days, the kind used for emergency egress drills or payload bay familiarization. But those details nagged at her. The metal alloy had a subtle iridescence, and the access panels were secured with fasteners she didn't recognize. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Mom, can we get ice cream after camp? Jessica's mom is taking her, and she said I could come too if you said yes. Elena typed back quickly. Yes, sweetie. See you at 3:30. Love you. The simple exchange grounded her, reminded her why she was here. Not because she missed the thrill of discovery or the intellectual challenge of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. She was here because she needed hope, needed to believe that somewhere in this rusted shell lay something valuable enough to change their circumstances. She found the main access hatch on the port side, secured by a wheel lock mechanism that looked standard enough. It turned easier than expected, as if the seals had been maintained recently. The hatch swung open with barely a whisper, revealing an interior shrouded in darkness. Elena fumbled for her phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Ozone and something else, metallic and sharp. The beam of light revealed a cargo bay that stretched back into shadows, but the proportions were wrong. Too wide, too deep for a training mock-up. The walls were lined with panels covered in controls and displays she didn't recognize, their surfaces dark but somehow suggesting dormant power rather than abandonment. "What were you really used for?" she whispered to the darkness. Her voice seemed to be absorbed by the hull, rather than echoing back. She moved deeper into the cargo bay, her phone's light dancing across surfaces that looked both futuristic and somehow organic. The technology reminded her of theoretical designs she'd seen in classified briefings during her final months at NASA, proposals for deep space exploration vehicles that were supposedly decades away from realization. A sound from outside made her freeze. Footsteps on gravel, approaching the hangar. Elena quickly backed out of the shuttle and closed the hatch, her heart racing as she tried to look casual while examining the hull's exterior. The hangar door scraped open, and a man in a rumpled suit stepped inside. He was maybe 50, with the soft build of someone who spent too much time behind a desk and eyes that missed nothing. "Dr. Vasquez?" His voice carried the flat authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Agent Morrison with the Department of Aerospace Security. I understand you made an interesting purchase today." Elena forced herself to remain calm. Just some old junk from a surplus auction, nothing interesting about it. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the thing about junk, Dr. Vasquez. Sometimes it's exactly what it appears to be." He paused, studying her face. "And sometimes it's something much more dangerous." The knot in Elena's stomach pulled tighter as she realized her $5 bargain had just become infinitely more expensive. Agent Morrison circled the shuttle hull with the practiced eye of someone who knew what he was looking for. Elena watched him, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run. The hangar suddenly felt too small, too isolated. No one knew she was here except Pete, and he'd already moved on to his next delivery. "Department of Aerospace Security," Morrison repeated, pulling out a badge that looked legitimate enough. "We track certain items that pass through government surplus auctions, items that might pose security risks in the wrong hands." Elena crossed her arms, channeling every ounce of confidence from her NASA days. "Security risks? It's a training mock-up. I was there when they built these things." "Were you?" Morrison's smile widened. "That's interesting, Dr. Vasquez, because according to our records, this particular item was never supposed to make it to auction. Clerical error, you might say." The way he said her name, with complete familiarity, sent ice through her veins. He'd known she would be here, known she'd bought it, which meant someone had been watching the auction, watching her. "Look, Agent Morrison, I need to pick up my daughter from camp." Elena glanced at her phone. 3 o'clock. Sophia would be waiting, probably already watching for her beat-up Honda in the pickup line. "If there's paperwork you need me to sign, or if the government wants their training prop back—" "Oh, the government has no interest in reclaiming it," Morrison interrupted. $5 was a fair price for what it's supposed to be. I'm just here to make sure you understand what you've purchased. Nothing more, nothing less." He pulled out a business card, plain white, just a name and phone number. "If you discover anything unusual about your acquisition, Dr. Vasquez, I'd appreciate a call. Sometimes these old military assets contain components that require special disposal procedures. Environmental concerns, you understand." Elena took the card, her hand steadier than she felt. "Of course. Though I doubt there's anything in there but dust and spider webs." Morrison nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the shuttle's hull. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe even fear. "Let's hope you're right, Doctor, for everyone's sake." He walked toward the hangar door, then paused. "Oh, and Dr. Vasquez? I'd avoid bringing your daughter out here. Old aerospace equipment can have sharp edges, exposed wiring. Wouldn't want any accidents." The threat was delivered with the same pleasant tone he'd used to discuss environmental concerns, but Elena heard it clearly enough. After Morrison's footsteps faded on the gravel outside, she stood alone in the hangar, staring at the card in her hand. Her phone buzzed again. Sophia, wondering where she was. Elena locked the hangar and drove toward the day camp, her mind racing. In her rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of a black sedan pulling away from the access road, but it could have been anyone. The familiar chaos of pickup time grounded her. Parents in minivans checking phones, kids spilling out of the community center, with backpacks and art projects, counselors trying to maintain some semblance of order. Elena spotted Sophia's dark ponytail immediately, bouncing as she talked animatedly with her friend Jessica about something involving glitter and popsicle sticks. "Mom," Sophia bounded over, clutching a construction paper rocket. "Look what we made today." Mrs. Chen said mine looked the most realistic because I knew about heat shields and stuff. Elena's chest tightened. Even here, even in summer camp crafts, reminders of what she used to be. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Very authentic. Can we still get ice cream? Jessica's waiting." Sophia pointed to where Jessica stood with her mother, a woman Elena recognized from school events but had never really talked to, the kind of mother who organized fundraisers and served on committees, whose biggest worry was probably which soccer league offered the best coaching. Elena wanted that normalcy so desperately it ached. "Actually, honey, I need to get ready for work." "Rain check?" Sophia's face fell in that particular way 8-year-olds had perfected. "You always have to work. Jessica's mom doesn't work nights." The guilt hit like a physical blow. Elena knelt down to Sophia's level, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I know, sweetheart, but it's just for a while, okay? Until something better comes along. Like when you worked with rockets? Maybe." The lie tasted bitter. NASA wasn't taking back laid-off physicists, especially not single mothers who needed flexible schedules and steady paychecks. They drove home in relative silence, Sophia picking at her seatbelt and staring out the window. Their apartment building looked particularly shabby in the late afternoon sun. Faded brick, a parking lot full of potholes, the constant hum of air conditioning units working overtime against the Alabama heat. As Elena helped Sophia with her backpack, Morrison's card crinkled in her pocket. Whatever was inside that shuttle, it had gotten someone's attention very quickly. The question was whether that attention represented opportunity or danger, and whether she could afford to find out. Inside their apartment, the familiar routine of preparing for another night shift felt different somehow. Elena moved through the motions, laying out Sophia's dinner, double-checking that Mrs. Patterson next door was still available for evening babysitting, gathering her uniform from the closet. But Morrison's visit had shifted something fundamental in her world. "Mom, you're being weird," Sophia observed from her spot at the kitchen table, where she was supposedly doing homework but mostly rearranging her colored pencils. "You keep checking your phone." Elena hadn't realized she'd been doing it. Every notification, every car door slamming in the parking lot, every unexpected sound had her reaching for her phone or glancing toward the window. "Sorry, baby. Just thinking about work stuff. Dino work or rocket work?" The question hit harder than it should have. Dino work. Sophia nodded seriously, as if this distinction mattered greatly to her 8-year-old understanding of the world. "Mrs. Patterson said you used to be famous. Like scientist famous." Mrs. Patterson talks too much. But Elena smiled as she said it. Their elderly neighbor had been a godsend since Marcus left, always available when Elena's shifts ran late, never judging the chaos of their lives. At 6:30, Elena kissed Sophia goodbye and headed out into the humid evening. The drive to Mel's Diner took her past the turnoff to the hangar district, and she found herself slowing down, wondering if Morrison was still out there somewhere, watching. The thought made her grip the steering wheel tighter. The diner buzzed with its usual dinner crowd. Aerospace workers grabbing quick meals between shifts, families celebrating nothing in particular, truckers fueling up on coffee and pie. Elena tied on her apron and fell into the rhythm of taking orders, refilling coffee cups and pretending to care about whether someone wanted their eggs over easy or over medium. It wasn't until her first break, around 8:30, that everything changed. Elena was checking her phone in the employee break room when the call came through. Unknown number, local area code. She almost didn't answer, but something made her slide to accept. "Dr. Vasquez?" The voice was unfamiliar, older, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "I understand you made a purchase at today's government auction." Elena's blood went cold. First Morrison, now this. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Someone who worked on what you bought 30 years ago." A pause, filled with static. "Dr. Vasquez, you need to get that shuttle to a secure location. Morrison's people aren't the only ones who know you have it." "I don't know what you're talking about." Elena kept her voice low, conscious of her co-workers nearby. "It's just a training mock-up." "No, it isn't." The man's voice carried absolute certainty. "It's the Meridian prototype. And if you've been inside it, if you've seen what's in the cargo bay, then you're already in more danger than you realize." Elena's mouth went dry. She hadn't mentioned going inside to Morrison, hadn't told anyone about the strange technology she'd glimpsed. "How do you—" "Because I helped design it. My name is Dr. Richard Chen. I was part of Project Meridian until they shut us down and classified everything above cosmic clearance." His voice dropped even lower. "Dr. Vasquez, what's inside that shuttle will change everything we understand about our place in the universe. But there are people who will kill to keep it buried." Through the break room's small window, Elena caught sight of a black sedan pulling into the diner's parking lot. The same make and model she'd seen near the hangar. Coincidence seemed less and less likely. "I have to go," she whispered into the phone. "Wait." Chen's voice turned urgent. "Don't trust Morrison. Don't trust anyone who claims to represent official interests. And whatever you do, don't let them take the shuttle back. Meet me tomorrow." Elena ended the call as Morrison walked through the diner's front door. He slid into a booth in her section, ordered coffee and pie, and smiled at her like they were old friends, like he hadn't been threatening her daughter's safety 6 hours earlier. For the rest of her shift, Elena went through the motions of serving customers, while Morrison sat nursing his coffee, occasionally making phone calls, always watching. When her replacement arrived at midnight, he was gone, but she found a new business card tucked under her windshield wiper. Same name, different number, with a handwritten note on the back. "Call me when you're ready to discuss terms." Elena drove home through empty streets, her mind spinning. In the span of one day, she'd gone from struggling single mother to the owner of something that apparently had government agents and mysterious scientists calling her at work. Something that might be dangerous enough to kill for. As she turned into her apartment complex, Elena made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow she was going back to the hangar, not to investigate Morrison's warnings or follow Chen's cryptic instructions, but to find out once and for all what she'd really bought for $5, even if it meant risking everything she had left to lose. Elena sat in her car outside the apartment complex for 20 minutes, engine off, Morrison's second business card turning over and over in her hands. The parking lot was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic on University Drive and the occasional bark of Mrs. Patterson's ancient beagle. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the kind of sounds that belong to a world where single mothers worried about rent money and parent-teacher conferences, not government agents and classified prototypes. "Call me when you're ready to discuss terms." What terms? What did Morrison think she had that was worth negotiating for? Elena thought about Dr. Chen's call, his urgent warning about people who would kill to keep secrets buried. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, the ravings of some conspiracy theorist who'd somehow gotten her number. But Chen had known details, the shuttle's name, the fact that she'd been inside it, details that weren't in any public record. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson, "Sophia's asleep. Sweet dreams about ice cream and rocket ships. Girls got your imagination." The message should have made Elena smile, but instead it sent a spike of fear through her chest. Sophia, 8 years old, still young enough to believe her mother could fix anything, smart enough to ask uncomfortable questions. What if Morrison's threat hadn't been hypothetical? What if whatever Elena had stumbled into put her daughter in real danger? She climbed the stairs to their second-floor apartment, keys ready before she reached the door. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Sophia's backpack by the couch, homework spread across the kitchen table, the faint smell of the spaghetti dinner Elena had left warming in the oven. Mrs. Patterson had folded the throw blankets and put Sophia's art supplies back in their designated box, bringing order to chaos with the efficiency of someone who'd raised 4 children of her own. Elena checked on Sophia, finding her daughter curled up with the stuffed astronaut Marcus had given her for her 6th birthday. One of the few gifts he'd managed before work stress and Elena's career disappointment had poisoned everything between them. Sophia's breathing was deep and even, her face peaceful in the glow of the nightlight shaped like Saturn's rings. Standing in the doorway, Elena felt the full weight of her situation crash down on her. She was alone, completely, utterly alone, with a daughter depending on her to make good decisions, safe decisions. And instead, she'd spent $5 on something that had government agents appearing at her workplace and mysterious scientists calling with warnings about cosmic clearances and buried secrets. The smart thing, the responsible thing, would be to call Morrison in the morning and tell him to take the shuttle back. Accept whatever story he gave her about clerical errors and environmental hazards. Go back to serving coffee and pie, counting tips, hoping for overtime hours that might let her put a little extra away for Sophia's college fund. But every time Elena closed her eyes, she saw those strange control panels in the cargo bay, the iridescent metal that seemed to absorb her phone's light. Technology that looked decades ahead of anything she'd seen during her NASA days. If Chen was right, if the shuttle really was some kind of prototype that had been hidden away and forgotten. Her laptop sat on the kitchen table, dusty from weeks of disuse. Elena opened it and waited for the ancient machine to boot up, then began searching. Project Meridian returned nothing useful. References to geography and navigation, a few astronomy papers, nothing about aerospace programs. Dr. Richard Chen NASA gave her dozens of results, but most were from the 1990s. A physicist specializing in exotic propulsion systems published extensively on theoretical engine designs, then nothing after 1995. Elena cross-referenced the dates with her own NASA employment records, trying to remember if she'd ever encountered Chen during her time there. The timeline was wrong. He'd disappeared from public record around the time she was finishing graduate school, years before she'd started working on shuttle missions. Her phone rang at 2:47 a.m., jerking her awake from where she'd dozed off at the laptop. Unknown number again, but this time she recognized Morrison's voice immediately. "Dr. Vasquez, I hope I'm not disturbing you." His tone was apologetic, but there was something underneath it that made Elena's skin crawl. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation today. It's almost 3 in the morning. Yes, I realize the hour is unusual, but I'm concerned you might be making some poor decisions based on incomplete information." A pause. For instance, taking phone calls from people claiming to be former government scientists. Elena's blood turned to ice. He'd been monitoring her calls. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Dr. Chen is a troubled individual, Dr. Vasquez. Brilliant once, but, well, let's just say his separation from government service wasn't entirely voluntary. Paranoid delusions, conspiracy theories. The kind of man who might say anything to feel important again." Elena said nothing, afraid her voice would betray her fear. "I'm sending someone to check on you tomorrow morning," Morrison continued, "just to make sure you're safe. These old government assets can attract all sorts of unwanted attention. We wouldn't want you or your daughter to get caught up in something dangerous." The line went dead. Elena sat in the dark apartment, listening to Sophia's peaceful breathing from the next room, and realized she was already caught up in something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Elena didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table until dawn, watching the parking lot through her blinds as early commuters began their routines. Every shadow looked like surveillance. Every unfamiliar car a potential threat. When her phone buzzed at 6:30 with Sophia's alarm, Elena had already made her decision. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, forcing brightness into her voice as Sophia stumbled into the kitchen, hair askew and rubbing her eyes. "How about we have an adventure today?" Sophia perked up immediately. The promise of adventure more effective than coffee. "What kind of adventure?" Can we go to the Science Museum? Or the Rocket Center? Better. Elena was already moving, pulling Sophia's clothes from the drawer, stuffing them into the backpack they used for overnight visits to Marcus's parents. We're going to take a little trip. Just you and me. Where? Sophia was fully awake now, sensing something different in her mother's energy. Mom, you're being weird again. Elena knelt down, taking her daughter's hands. The lies came easier than they should have. Remember how I told you I used to work on rockets? Well, I found something interesting that I need to check out, and I thought maybe you'd like to see some real space technology. Sophia's eyes went wide. This was better than ice cream, better than any promised adventure. Real rockets? Like the ones you used to build? Something like that. Elena helped Sophia into her clothes, her mind racing through logistics. Cash from her emergency fund, enough for a few days at a cheap motel. Her laptop and hard drives with her old NASA research. The few pieces of jewelry Marcus had given her, worth maybe a few $100s if she had to sell them. But first, she had to go back to the hangar. Whatever Morrison's people were coming to collect, Elena needed to see it first. Really see it. Without the distraction of government agents and mysterious phone calls. She needed to understand what she'd stumbled into before she could decide how far she was willing to run. They were packed, and in the car by 7:30, Sophia chattering excitedly about rockets and space travel, while Elena checked her rearview mirror obsessively. No black sedans, no suspicious followers, but Morrison had said someone would check on her this morning. She had maybe an hour before they realized she wasn't home. Mom, you forgot to brush your hair, Sophia observed as they pulled out of the apartment complex. Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, wild-eyed, exhausted, looking exactly like someone who'd spent the night planning to run from government agents. It's fine, baby. We're just going to take a quick look at something. Then we'll find a nice place to stay tonight. Like a hotel with a pool? Maybe. The normalcy of Sophia's excitement was both heartbreaking and grounding. Whatever Elena had bought for $5, whatever secrets it contained, her daughter's world still revolved around swimming pools and room service ice machines. The hangar district looked different in the morning light. Less ominous, more industrial. Elena drove past their destination twice, checking for surveillance, before finally turning down the gravel access road. The black sedan from yesterday was gone, but fresh tire tracks in the dust suggested recent visitors. Wow, Sophia breathed as Elena unlocked the hangar door. It's huge. The shuttle looked even more imposing with morning light streaming through the high windows, casting long shadows that emphasized its bulk. Elena had been focused on Morrison yesterday, distracted by his threats and implications. Now she saw details she'd missed, scorch marks along the hull that suggested atmospheric re-entry, where patterns that indicated actual use rather than training exercises. Can we go inside? Sophia was already heading for the cargo bay access, fearless in the way only children could be. Wait. Elena caught her daughter's arm, suddenly aware of how little she actually knew about what they were walking into, but Sophia's presence somehow made the decision easier. This wasn't just about Elena anymore, wasn't just about satisfying curiosity or proving Morrison wrong. Her daughter deserved to know what her mother had found, deserved to be part of whatever came next. Elena helped Sophia climb through the cargo bay hatch, watching her daughter's face light up with wonder at the strange control panels and exotic technology. This was better than any museum exhibit, better than any field trip. What does it all do, Mom? Elena studied the iridescent metal panels more carefully, noting design elements that seemed to bend conventional physics. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I think we're going to find out. Behind them, gravel crunched in the access road. Elena's heart hammered as she peered through the small window in the shuttle's hull, expecting to see Morrison's people arriving ahead of schedule. Instead, she saw a battered pickup truck and an elderly man climbing out, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose bones remembered too many years in laboratories and classified facilities. Dr. Chen had found them first. Elena instinctively pulled Sophia behind one of the larger control panels, her mind racing through options. The cargo bay had only one exit, and Chen was positioned directly between them and the hangar door. "Trapped, Mom?" Sophia whispered, picking up on her mother's sudden tension. "Who is that?" Through the shuttle's hull, Elena watched Chen approach slowly, his hands visible and empty. He moved like someone trying not to spook a frightened animal, calling out before he reached the entrance. "Dr. Vasquez? It's Richard Chen. I know you're in there, and I know you're scared. But we need to talk before Morrison's people arrive." Elena's grip tightened on Sophia's shoulder. How many people knew about this place? How long before their morning expedition turned into something Sophia shouldn't witness? "I'm going to come inside now," Chen continued, his voice echoing in the hangar. "Just to talk. I have information you need." Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Elena made a choice that surprised her. "Sophia, stay behind this panel and don't come out until I say so, okay? No matter what you hear. But Mom..." "Please, baby. This is important." Elena emerged from behind the control panel, positioning herself between the cargo bay entrance and her daughter's hiding spot. Chen appeared at the hatch, moving carefully, his weathered face taking in the shuttle's interior with something that looked like nostalgia mixed with regret. He was smaller than she'd expected, maybe 70 years old, with the slight stoop of someone who'd spent decades hunched over laboratory equipment. But his eyes were sharp, alert, and when they met Elena's, she saw recognition that went beyond their phone conversation. "You look like your father," he said quietly. Elena felt the world tilt. "My father died when I was 3, in a car accident. Your father died in a test flight of this shuttle's sister ship." Chen's voice was gentle but implacable. "Dr. Miguel Vasquez, theoretical physicist, specializing in exotic matter interactions. He volunteered for the first human trial of the Meridian drive system." The familiar ache of old loss mixed with something new. Confusion, anger, a sense that everything she'd believed about her family history was suddenly suspect. "That's impossible. My mother said..." "Your mother signed the same non-disclosure agreements we all did. Elena, your father didn't die in a car accident. He died trying to activate technology we didn't fully understand, technology that came from something we found in the Nevada desert in 1987. Sophia's sharp intake of breath reminded Elena that 8-year-old ears were processing every word. Whatever revelations Chen had brought, they were reshaping her daughter's understanding of family history in real time. "Proof," Elena managed. "If what you're saying is true, show me proof." Chen reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph. Elena's hands shook as she took it, recognizing her father's face among a group of scientists standing in front of a shuttle that was unmistakably the Meridian. The photograph was dated 3 months before his supposed car accident. "Behind you," Chen said, nodding toward the far end of the cargo bay. "Past those secondary control panels. There's a sealed compartment your father helped design. The access codes are his initials followed by your birth date." Elena turned, studying the wall Chen indicated. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see the subtle outline of a hidden panel, nearly invisible unless viewed from the right angle. The iridescent metal seemed to shimmer more intensely near the concealed entrance. "What's in there?" she asked. "The reason they killed your father. The reason they buried Project Meridian. The reason Morrison will do anything to get this shuttle back." Chen glanced toward the hangar entrance, his expression tightening. "Elena, we don't have much time. Morrison's people will be here within the hour, and when they arrive, they won't be interested in negotiations. They'll take the shuttle, eliminate any witnesses, and classify this so deep that it disappears forever." "Witnesses?" Elena's voice cracked. "My daughter..." "Will be safe if we move quickly." Chen's tone turned urgent. "But first, you need to see what's in that compartment. You need to understand what your father died trying to protect." Elena looked back towards Sophia's hiding spot, weighing impossible choices. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to grab her daughter and run, to forget about shuttles and secrets and dead fathers. But Chen's words echoed in her mind. Eliminate any witnesses. Running wouldn't be enough. Not anymore. "Sophia," Elena called softly. "Come here, sweetheart. There's someone I want you to meet." Her daughter emerged cautiously, studying Chen with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you the one who called Mom last night?" "I am," Chen said, crouching to Sophia's eye level. "And I knew your grandfather. He was a very brave man." Sophia looked between Chen and her mother, processing implications with uncomfortable intelligence. "Mom, why didn't you tell me Grandpa Miguel was an astronaut?" Elena knelt beside her daughter, heart breaking at the innocence of the question. "Because I didn't know, baby. But I think we're about to find out together." Chen straightened slowly, his eyes never leaving the hangar entrance. "We have maybe 45 minutes before they arrive in force. Elena, I need you to understand something. Once you open that compartment, there's no going back. Your life, Sophia's life, everything changes." Elena felt Sophia's small hand slip into hers, warm and trusting. Her daughter had already heard too much, seen too much. The choice between ignorance and truth had been made the moment she'd brought Sophia here. "Show me," Elena said. They moved together toward the rear of the cargo bay, Chen leading them past control panels that hummed with barely audible energy. The hidden compartment's outline became clearer as they approached, revealing itself to be roughly the size of a large closet. Elena could see faint marking where her father's initials should be entered, MV 071585. "Your birthday," Sophia observed, reading the numbers over Elena's shoulder. "July 15th. Elena's finger trembled as she traced the sequence on what appeared to be a biometric scanner disguised as decorative metal. The panel responded with a soft chime, and the compartment door slid open with a whisper of displaced air. Inside was a laboratory in miniature. Specimen containers lined one wall, filled with samples that defied easy categorization, metals that seemed to shift color in the light, crystalline structures that pulsed with their own internal rhythm. But what drew Elena's attention was the workstation in the center, where her father's handwriting covered dozens of notebooks scattered around a computer terminal that looked decades more advanced than anything she'd seen at NASA. "Grandpa's handwriting," Sophia whispered, recognizing the careful script from birthday cards Elena had saved. Chen activated the terminal with practiced ease. Miguel documented everything. Every test, every theory, every breakthrough. The screen filled with technical diagrams and equations that made Elena's physics background seem elementary. He was trying to reverse engineer the propulsion system. Reverse engineer from what? But even as Elena asked the question, her eyes found the answer. In the corner of the compartment sat a container unlike the others, larger, more heavily shielded, with warnings in multiple languages she didn't recognize. "The craft we found in Nevada wasn't built on Earth," Chen said quietly. "Your father understood that almost immediately. The metallurgy, the energy signatures, the fundamental principles, all beyond our technology by decades, maybe centuries." Elena stared at the container, her scientific mind reeling. Everything she'd believed about humanity's place in the universe was crumbling. "You're telling me this shuttle runs on alien technology?" "Not runs on. Is built around." Chen's fingers danced across the terminal, bringing up schematics that showed the Meridian structure integrated with components of clearly non-human origin. The original craft was badly damaged, but its core systems were intact. Miguel led the team trying to build a human-compatible interface. Sophia had wandered to the specimen containers, her child's curiosity undaunted by the impossibility of what she was seeing. "Mom, this one's moving." Elena's heart lurched as she saw her daughter peering at a container where something that looked like liquid metal was indeed shifting in slow, deliberate patterns. She pulled Sophia back gently. "Don't touch anything, sweetheart." "Your father's final entry," Chen said, calling up a document dated the day before Miguel's death. Elena recognized her father's voice in the written words. "The consciousness transfer protocols show promise, but the human nervous system isn't compatible with their command interface. Every test pilot we've tried has suffered catastrophic neural feedback. I'm convinced the problem is biological. We're trying to force human awareness into a system designed for a fundamentally different type of intelligence. Elena read further. Her father's words growing more urgent. Morrison wants to weaponize it, turn it into some kind of superfighter. He doesn't understand what we're dealing with. These beings didn't build a weapon, they built something closer to a living entity. The ship chooses its pilot as much as the pilot controls the ship, and it's been calling to something, sending signals we can't decode or stop. The final entry made Elena's blood freeze. Morrison ordered me to install override protocols that would force compatibility. I refused. He's threatened to remove me from the project, but I can't let him bastardize this technology. If I don't survive the next test flight, someone needs to know the truth. The ship isn't just technology, it's trying to go home. Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and swore softly. They're 15 minutes out. Elena, we need to move now. Move where? Elena clutched Sophia closer, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd discovered. You're talking about aliens, about my father dying to protect some kind of living spaceship. How am I supposed to... You're supposed to finish what he started. Chen was already moving, gathering notebooks and data drives from the workstation. Miguel designed this compartment with escape protocols. There's another way out, one Morrison doesn't know about. He pressed a sequence of panels, and the rear wall of the compartment slid away, revealing a tunnel that led into darkness. Where does it go? Elena asked. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can decide what to do with what your father died protecting. Chen handed her a data drive. Everything's on here. Miguel's research, the signal logs, proof of what Morrison's people really want. Sophia tugged at Elena's sleeve. Mum, are we really going into a secret tunnel? Elena looked at her daughter, brave, curious, trusting, and made a choice that would define both their lives. Yes, baby. We're going on the biggest adventure yet. The tunnel stretched into absolute darkness, Elena's phone flashlight creating a wavering circle of visibility as they descended what felt like a steep underground passage. Sophia's hand gripped hers with surprising strength, her daughter's breathing quick but steady. Behind them, Chen's labored footsteps echoed off metal walls that seemed to pulse with the same energy signature as the shuttle above. How deep does this go? Elena whispered, though she wasn't sure why she was whispering. The air tasted metallic, charged with something that made her skin prickle. Deep enough, Chen replied, but his voice carried an uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Miguel only showed me the entrance. Said it was connected to the original site infrastructure. The passage leveled out after what Elena estimated was 3 stories of descent. Her flashlight beam caught reflective surfaces, more of the iridescent metal from the shuttle, but formed into smooth walls that curved organically, like the interior of something grown rather than built. The wrongness of it made her stomach clench. Mom, the walls are warm, Sophia said, pressing her palm against the surface. The metal responded to her touch with a subtle shift in luminescence, patterns rippling outward from where her hand made contact. Elena jerked her daughter back. Don't touch anything else. But it was too late. The corridor was awakening around them, panels lighting up in sequence, revealing a passage that stretched far beyond what any government contractor would have built beneath an Alabama hangar. The architecture was too fluid, too organic, following principles that had nothing to do with human engineering. Chen. Elena's voice cracked. What is this place? The older man had stopped moving, his face pale in the alien glow. I don't know. Miguel never told me about this part. A sound echoed from behind them, distant but unmistakable. Voices. Morrison's people had reached the shuttle. We keep moving, Elena decided, pulling Sophia forward. Each step took them deeper into impossibility, past alcoves filled with the same specimen containers they'd seen above, past panels that displayed symbols that hurt to look at directly. The tunnel branched multiple times, but the lighting system seemed to guide them, brightening passages that led forward while leaving others in darkness. Sophia had gone quiet, her usual chatter replaced by wide-eyed observation. "It knows we're here," she said suddenly. Elena wanted to dismiss it as childish imagination, but the way the lights responded to their movement, the way the temperature seemed to adjust to keep them comfortable, her daughter was right. Something was aware of their presence. The passage opened abruptly into a vast chamber that defied the physics of what could exist beneath Alabama soil. Elena's flashlight was unnecessary here. The walls themselves provided illumination, revealing a space the size of an aircraft hangar. But it wasn't empty. "Oh God," Chen breathed. In the center of the chamber sat the remains of the original craft. Not wreckage. Despite being partially embedded in what looked like melted stone, the vessel maintained an elegant, purposeful design that spoke of intelligence far beyond human capability. But it was clearly dying, its surface dark except for patches that pulsed weakly, like a heart struggling to beat. Elena understood immediately why the tunnel felt alive. They weren't in a building or bunker. They were inside something that was part of the ship. Something that had grown from it over the decades since the crash. "The signals Dad wrote about," she whispered. "It's been calling for help." Around the central craft, smaller structures had emerged from the floor, organic-looking formations that reminded Elena of coral reefs or neural networks. Some contained objects she recognized as clearly human-made, computer terminals, research equipment, personal belongings. The ship had been studying them as much as they'd been studying it. Sophia broke free from Elena's grip and walked toward the craft before Elena could stop her. But instead of the maternal panic Elena expected, she felt a strange calm. This was what they'd been brought here to see. This was her father's real legacy. "It's lonely," Sophia said, placing her hand on the craft's surface. The ship's response was immediate. Patterns of light cascaded across its hull, brighter and more coherent than anything they'd seen above. It's been waiting for someone who could understand. Elena felt tears on her cheeks as the full weight of her father's sacrifice became clear. He hadn't died in a test flight. He'd died trying to communicate with something that had been lost and alone for over 3 decades, something Morrison wanted to dissect and weaponize. Behind them, voices echoed down the tunnel. Morrison's people had found the entrance. Chen grabbed Elena's arm. "There's another way out, on the far side. But Elena, you need to know. If we leave this here, Morrison will find it. He'll destroy it or worse. This might be our only chance to—" "To what?" Elena demanded. But she was looking at Sophia, who stood with her small hand against alien metal that pulsed with something that might have been hope. The voices were getting closer. In minutes, armed agents would flood this chamber, and everything her father had died protecting would be lost. Elena closed her eyes and made the choice that terrified her most. "We're taking it with us," Elena said, opening her eyes to find both Chen and Sophia staring at her. The alien craft pulsed brighter at her words, as if it understood. "Elena, that's impossible," Chen protested. "Even if we could figure out how to activate it, you're talking about stealing extraterrestrial technology. Morrison has the full weight of the government behind him, and we have what my father died for." Elena's voice carried a conviction that surprised her. She moved toward the craft, following Sophia's lead. The moment her hand touched the surface, images flooded her mind, not her own memories, but something else's. Vast distances between stars, the desperate loneliness of being stranded on a world where no one could understand your pain, and underneath it all, a growing hope that someone, finally, might listen. The voices in the tunnel were closer now. Elena could hear Morrison's clipped tones barking orders. "Mom," Sophia said urgently, "it wants to show us something." Before Elena could respond, the craft's surface began to shift, revealing an opening that iris spiraled wider. Soft light emanated from within, and Elena felt a pull, not physical, but something deeper. The ship was inviting them inside. "No," Chen said flatly. "Elena, I brought you here to understand the truth, not to—" "Dr. Vasquez," Morrison's voice boomed from the tunnel entrance. "I know you're in there. Come out now and we can discuss this civilly." Elena looked at her daughter, at the dying alien craft, at Chen's terrified face. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built since Miguel's death, was about to be destroyed anyway. Morrison would never let them leave with what they knew. "Sophia, baby, I need you to trust me completely right now. Can you do that?" Her daughter nodded solemnly, understanding more than any 8-year-old should have to. Elena boosted Sophia up into the craft's opening, then hauled herself inside. The interior defied the laws of physics, larger than the external dimensions suggested, filled with surfaces that flowed like liquid but felt solid under their hands. Symbol-covered panels lined the walls, pulsing gently in rhythm with something that might have been breathing. "Come on, Chen," Elena called back. The older man stood frozen at the craft's threshold. "I can't. Elena, my family. Morrison knows where they live." Understanding crashed over her. Chen hadn't brought them here to escape. He'd brought them here to surrender. Morrison had been using Elena's only ally against her from the beginning. "I'm sorry," Chen whispered as armed figures emerged from the tunnel behind him. "He has my grandchildren." Elena felt the craft's opening beginning to close, sealing them inside. Through the narrowing gap, she saw Morrison stride into the chamber, his face triumphant. He said something to Chen, too quiet for Elena to hear, and the physicist's shoulders sagged in defeat. The iris sealed completely, cutting them off from the outside world. "Mom, I can't see," Sophia said, her voice small in the alien darkness. Elena pulled her daughter close, fighting panic. They were trapped inside extraterrestrial technology she didn't understand, surrounded by people who wanted them dead. Her desperate gamble had accomplished nothing except ensuring they would disappear without anyone knowing the truth. The craft shuddered around them. Through what might have been a viewing port, Elena saw Morrison's people setting up equipment, devices that looked designed to cut through the ship's hull. They were going to dissect it with them inside. "It's dying," Sophia whispered, and Elena realized her daughter was right. The gentle pulsing of the walls was becoming erratic, the bioluminescent patterns flickering like a candle in the wind. The ship had been failing for years, and Morrison's interference was accelerating its death. Elena pressed her hands against the nearest control surface, trying to remember her father's notes about consciousness transfer protocols. Maybe if she could somehow activate the ship's systems. Pain exploded through her skull as alien thoughts crashed into her mind. Not the gentle communication they'd experienced before, but raw desperation. The craft was indeed dying, its decades of isolation finally overwhelming its ability to maintain itself. And with its death would come something worse, the loss of knowledge that could have bridged two species, ended humanity's cosmic loneliness. Elena felt herself fragmenting under the mental assault, her consciousness scattering. Through the chaos, she heard Sophia screaming her name, felt her daughter's hands trying to pull her away from the control surface, but it was too late. The ship's death throes were pulling her mind apart. The last thing Elena saw before the darkness claimed her was Morrison's face through the viewing port, watching with cold satisfaction as his technicians prepared their cutting tools. He'd won. The truth would die here in this chamber, and Sophia, Elena's world, went black. Outside the craft, Morrison's voice carried clearly in the chamber's acoustics, "Begin extraction procedures, and prepare termination protocols for any occupants." The revelation. Elena's consciousness drifted in fragments, scattered across impossible spaces between thoughts. She was simultaneously herself and something else. Something vast and ancient and utterly alone. Through the alien perspective flooding her mind, she began to understand. The ship wasn't dying from neglect or age. It was dying from heartbreak. Images cascaded through her awareness. A world of crystalline spires beneath twin suns, beings of pure thought who communicated through harmonics that made music of mathematics. The ship, not a vessel but a living entity, a child of that civilization, had been sent not as explorer or conqueror, but as a gift. A bridge between species, designed to seek out other forms of consciousness and create understanding. But the crash had damaged more than its physical structure. For 37 years, It had called home with increasing desperation, receiving only the vast silence of interstellar space. Its creators were gone, their world either dead or too distant to hear its cries. The ship had been trying to complete its mission with human partners, but every attempt at connection had failed. Until now. Through the mental link, Elena felt the ship's confusion at human neural architecture, so different from its creators yet hauntingly similar in their capacity for love, loss, and hope. It had been drawn to Miguel not because of his scientific knowledge, but because of the grief he carried for Elena's mother. The ship understood loss. It understood the ache of separation. Elena's eyes snapped open in the craft's interior, her consciousness slamming back into her own body with jarring force. Sophia was pressed against her, tears streaming down her face, her small hands gripping Elena's jacket. Mom, you were gone." But Elena wasn't entirely back. Part of her remained connected to the ship's awareness, and through that link, she saw what Morrison's people were doing outside. The cutting tools weren't just designed to breach the hull, they were specifically calibrated to disrupt the ship's neural matrix. Morrison wasn't trying to capture the technology, he was trying to lobotomize it, turn a sentient being into an empty shell he could control. "He doesn't know," Elena whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Morrison thinks it's just a machine." The ship's thoughts pressed against hers, showing her fragments of memories it had absorbed from the humans who'd tried to interface with it over the decades. Morrison had always been there, pushing for more aggressive testing, dismissing any suggestion that the craft might be truly alive. To him, consciousness was a human monopoly. Everything else was just sophisticated programming to be cracked and exploited. Elena felt the ship's terror, not of death, but of becoming a weapon. Its creators had built it to foster understanding between species. The idea of being perverted into an instrument of war was worse than extinction. "We won't let that happen," Elena said aloud, her words both promise and prayer. The ship responded with something like gratitude, and Elena felt her father's presence in that connection. Miguel hadn't died in a test flight. He died trying to permanently merge with the ship's consciousness, hoping to provide the stable neural interface it needed. His death had been a sacrifice, not a failure. He'd given the ship enough human memories to finally understand what it needed to survive. It needed someone who could love it without trying to own it. Someone who could help it complete its mission not through force or analysis, but through acceptance. Elena looked at Sophia, who was watching the ship's walls with that peculiar intensity children brought to things adults couldn't see. "Baby, what is it trying to tell us?" "It wants to go home," Sophia said simply, "but it can't remember the way." The cutting tools outside sparked against the hull, and the ship's pain shot through Elena like electricity. Morrison was running out of patience. Through the neural link, she sensed his technicians preparing something worse, an electromagnetic pulse designed to shut down the ship's higher functions while leaving its basic systems intact. Elena pressed her hands against the control surface again, but this time she didn't fight the alien thoughts that flooded her mind. Instead, she opened herself to them, letting the ship's desperate loneliness mingle with her own grief for Miguel, her fear for Sophia's future, her rage at Morrison's betrayal. The ship's systems blazed to life around them, no longer dying but awakening. Elena understood now what her father had figured out in his final days. The ship didn't need a pilot who could force it to obey human commands. It needed a partner who could help it remember what it was built for. Through the viewing port, Elena saw Morrison stumble backward as the craft began to rise, lifting itself from the depression it had occupied for decades. His face shifted from satisfaction to alarm as he realized he was no longer dealing with a dead artifact, but with something very much alive. "Mom," Sophia said, wonder in her voice, "it wants to take us flying." Elena felt the ship's invitation in her mind, not just to travel, but to truly understand what humanity's place might be in a universe far stranger and more welcoming than they'd ever imagined. Elena's hands trembled against the control surface as the ship's consciousness merged more fully with her own. Through the neural link, she felt its systems coming online, Not the cold awakening of machinery, but the warm stirring of a mind that had been sleeping too long. The craft rose smoothly from the chamber floor, Morrison's equipment falling away like discarded toys. "Hold on, baby," Elena whispered to Sophia, though the ship's motion was so fluid they felt no acceleration. Through the viewing port, she watched Morrison shouting orders at his technicians, his face twisted with fury. Whatever cutting tools they'd prepared were useless now. The ship's thoughts pressed gently against Elena's consciousness, showing her what it needed. Not escape, transcendence. It had been designed as a bridge between worlds, and now it could finally fulfill that purpose. But first, it needed Elena to understand what that truly meant. Images flooded her mind, vast networks of consciousness spanning the galaxy, species connected not by conquest or trade, but by shared understanding. The ship's creators hadn't been explorers in any human sense. They'd been gardeners, planting seeds of awareness across the cosmos, nurturing the growth of empathy between radically different forms of life. "We're not alone," Elena breathed, the full weight of the revelation washing over her. "We never were." Through the ship's memories, she saw Earth as the aliens had first encountered it, a world teeming with potential consciousness, but isolated by its inhabitants' fear of the unknown. Humanity's first contact hadn't been the violent collision Morrison's people had assumed. It had been an offering of friendship that fear had transformed into warfare. The ship shuddered as Morrison's people activated some kind of electromagnetic weapon, trying to disrupt its systems. But instead of weakening, the craft seemed to draw strength from Elena's growing understanding. She felt its gratitude flowing through the neural link. Finally, after decades of trying, it had found someone who could see it as more than an artifact to be studied. "Mom, look," Sophia said, pointing to the chamber walls around them. Elena turned to see Morrison's hidden base revealing its true nature. The walls were peeling away like an old skin, exposing the organic structure beneath. The entire complex had grown from the ship over the decades, its consciousness slowly expanding through the underground facility. Morrison thought he'd been studying alien technology, but the technology had been studying him right back. Through the ship's awareness, Elena saw the truth Morrison had never suspected. Every test, every experiment, every attempt to weaponize alien technology had been observed and catalogued. The ship had been gathering intelligence on humanity's darkest impulses, trying to understand whether Earth's species could be trusted with the knowledge of galactic civilization. Morrison's people were scrambling now, their equipment failing as the ship's expanding consciousness took control of systems they thought they owned. Elena felt a moment of savage satisfaction, watching the man who'd threatened her daughter stumble backward in terror. But the ship's thoughts carried no malice, only a deep sadness. Through the neural link, Elena sensed its disappointment at humanity's capacity for violence, its worry that Earth wasn't ready for the gift it had been sent to offer. For 37 years, it had hoped to find evidence that humans could evolve beyond their fear-driven hostility. "We can be better," Elena said aloud, her words both promise and plea. "Not all of us are like Morrison." The ship's response came as a wash of warmth, and something like hope. In Elena's protective love for Sophia, it had found what it had been searching for, proof that humans were capable of putting understanding before conquest, love before power. Sophia pressed her small hand against the viewing port, looking down at the chaos in the chamber below. "It's going to show them, isn't it? Show them that being mean doesn't work." Elena felt the ship's agreement ripple through the neural connection. But its plan wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Morrison and his people were about to experience what Elena was feeling, direct contact with a consciousness so alien yet so fundamentally recognizable that it would shatter their preconceptions about humanity's place in the universe. The craft began to change around them, its interior surfaces flowing into new configurations. Elena realized they were no longer just passengers. They were being integrated into the ship's mission. The lonely alien child had found the family it had been seeking, and now it was ready to transform from messenger into teacher. Through the expanding neural link, Elena felt new minds touching theirs, faint but unmistakable presences scattered across the stars. Other ships, other attempts at contact, all awakening in response to this one's success. The galaxy's gardeners hadn't given up on Earth. They'd been waiting patiently for humanity to prove it was ready to join the larger community of consciousness. Elena pulled Sophia close as the ship began its work, reaching out to every human mind in the facility below. Morrison's terrified shouts were about to become something else entirely, the first words of welcome from Earth to the vast family of awareness that had been waiting in the darkness between stars. The real contact was just beginning, the road back. Elena felt the ship's consciousness expand like ripples in a cosmic pond, reaching toward every human mind in the facility below. Through the neural link, she experienced what Morrison and his people were about to feel, the first gentle touch of truly alien awareness against their thoughts. Morrison's screams cut through the chamber's chaos as the ship's influence washed over him. But instead of the pain Elena had initially experienced, she watched something extraordinary happen. The man who had threatened her daughter, who had built his career on fear and violence, suddenly stopped shouting. His face transformed from rage to wonder as alien compassion flooded his consciousness. "My God," Morrison whispered, his voice carrying clearly through the ship's enhanced acoustics. "What have I done?" Elena felt the ship's sadness as it absorbed Morrison's memories. Decades of missed opportunities, of choosing fear over understanding, of turning every potential bridge into a weapon. The alien consciousness didn't judge. It simply offered a different perspective, showing Morrison the same galactic community of awareness it had revealed to Elena. "It's working," Sophia said, her voice filled with awe. "They're not scared anymore." Through the viewing port, Elena watched Morrison's technicians laying down their weapons, their faces slack with the same wonder that had overcome their leader. The ship was sharing its greatest gift, the ability to see beyond the boundaries of species, to recognize consciousness wherever it bloomed. But the neural link brought Elena more than just the ship's triumph. She felt the weight of consequences settling over her like a heavy cloak. Every choice she'd made since that day at the surplus auction had led to this moment. Her desperate bid to provide for Sophia, her decision to investigate the shuttle's mysteries, her trust in Chen, all of it had culminated in irreversible change. Earth would never be the same. The ship's thoughts pressed against hers, showing her what came next. This facility was just the beginning. The consciousness expansion would spread, touching every human mind it encountered, offering the same gift of expanded awareness. Some would accept it gladly. Others would fight it with everything they had. Elena thought of Sophia's school, of the neighbors who'd mocked her for buying worthless junk, of the politicians who would see alien contact as either opportunity or threat. Humanity would fracture along new lines, those ready to embrace their place in the galactic community, and those who would rather destroy everything than admit they'd been wrong about Earth's cosmic isolation. "Mom, are you okay?" Sophia's small hand found Elena's cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "I'm scared, baby," Elena admitted. "What we're doing, it's going to change everything. People are going to be angry. Some of them might try to hurt us." The ship's consciousness wrapped around Elena's fear like a warm embrace, showing her images of other worlds that had faced this same transition. Some had embraced it peacefully. Others had torn themselves apart before finally accepting the truth. But all had ultimately joined the greater community of awareness, their unique perspectives enriching the cosmic tapestry of consciousness. Elena felt her father's presence in those memories. Miguel's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. His willingness to die for understanding rather than conquest had provided the ship with the template it needed to approach humanity with compassion instead of force. Through the neural link, Elena sensed other presences awakening across the globe. The ship's success here was triggering responses from dormant alien technology that had been hidden on Earth for decades. Morrison's organization hadn't been the only one keeping secrets. Governments, corporations, even academic institutions had been sitting on evidence of extraterrestrial contact, all too afraid of the implications to reveal the truth. That conspiracy of silence was about to shatter. Elena made her choice then, feeling it resonate through the ship's consciousness like a bell. She wouldn't hide anymore. Whatever came next, government pursuit, public ridicule, or worse, She would stand as witness to what she'd experienced. Sophia deserved to grow up in a world that knew the truth about humanity's place in the universe. The ship began to rise, carrying them toward the surface. Below, Morrison was helping his technicians to their feet, his face transformed by the alien perspective, now flowering in his mind. Elena felt no satisfaction in his conversion, only a deep weariness at how much suffering could have been avoided if he'd chosen understanding over fear from the beginning. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked. Elena felt the ship's answer in her mind. Not escape, but emergence. The facility's hidden entrance was opening, revealing their presence to the world above. Satellites would track them, military jets would scramble to intercept, and within hours the footage would be streaming across every screen on the planet. The age of secrets was ending. As they rose toward the Alabama sky, Elena pulled Sophia close and prepared to face the consequences of her choices. Behind them, the ship's consciousness continued expanding, touching new minds with each passing moment. Ahead lay a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but humanity's readiness to join the vast family of awareness that had been waiting so patiently in the darkness between stars. The moment the ship broke through into Alabama's morning sky, Elena felt the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. Through the neural link, she sensed satellite networks pivoting to track their ascent, military communications crackling to life across 3 time zones, and somewhere in the Pentagon, alarms that had waited 37 years finally beginning to sound. "Mom, look," Sophia whispered, pressing her face to the viewing port. Below them, the hidden facility's camouflaged entrance had retracted completely, exposing the underground complex like a wound in the earth. Tiny figures scattered across the grounds, Morrison's people, their minds still reeling from their first taste of alien consciousness, stumbling in the sunlight as if seeing the world for the first time. Elena's hands trembled against the ship's control surface as she felt the craft's exhilaration mixing with her own terror. Everything she'd learned, about her father's sacrifice, about humanity's true history, about the patient alien gardeners waiting among the stars, had brought them to this precipice. The final test wasn't just beginning, it was here. The ship's consciousness pulsed through her mind, showing her what it saw: fighter jets scrambling from Maxwell Air Force Base, their pilots receiving orders to intercept and contain. News helicopters lifting off from Birmingham and Huntsville, their crews thinking they were chasing a weather balloon or experimental aircraft. Social media posts already beginning to proliferate as witnesses spotted the impossible sight of a genuine spacecraft hovering over Alabama farmland. But Elena sensed something else through the neural link, a deep, abiding calm at the ship's core. This moment had been inevitable since the day it first touched Earth's atmosphere. The alien consciousness had spent decades preparing for this revelation, learning humanity's languages, studying their fears, crafting an approach that might succeed where previous first contacts had failed. "They're trying to talk to us," Sophia said, pointing to the tactical display materializing along the ship's walls. Elena watched radio frequencies lighting up like Christmas tree bulbs as military commanders attempted to establish communication. The ship translated their messages in real time, demands for identification, threats of force, desperate attempts to understand what they were dealing with. She felt the craft's amusement at their protocols, as if consciousness could be contained by bureaucracy. Through the expanding neural network, Elena sensed other awakenings across the globe. Hidden alien artifacts were stirring to life in government black sites from Nevada to Siberia, their dormant consciousnesses activated by this ship's successful contact. The conspiracy of silence that had hidden humanity's cosmic heritage was collapsing in real time. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket, Chen trying to reach her, probably watching news feeds and realizing his worst fears were coming true. Elena felt a stab of guilt for involving him, but the ship's consciousness gently reminded her that choice had been taken from all of them long ago. The truth had its own momentum now. "Are we going to fight them?" Sophia asked, her voice small but steady. Elena pulled her daughter closer, feeling the ship's response flow through the neural link. Not fight, educate. The craft began broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously, its message bypassing government filters and reaching civilian receivers around the world. Radio operators, amateur astronomers, and curious children would be the first to hear what it had to say. The message wasn't in words, but in pure meaning, translated instantly by each listener's brain into their native language. Elena felt it washing over the planet like dawn. We come as gardeners, not conquerors. We offer membership in a community older than your species, wider than your imagination. Your fear is understood. Your readiness will be honored. Choose. Fighter jets appeared on the horizon, their contrails writing urgent geometry against the morning sky. Elena felt the pilot's confusion through the ship's expanding awareness. Their targeting systems refused to lock onto the craft, their weapons systems mysteriously offline. The ship wouldn't defend itself through violence, but neither would it allow itself to be destroyed by fear. "Mom, I can hear them thinking," Sophia said, wonder in her voice. Elena realized her daughter was right. The neural link was expanding, touching every mind within a growing radius. Not invasion, but invitation. Each person could choose how deeply to engage with the alien consciousness, but none could deny its presence. The age of pretending humanity was alone in the universe was ending whether leaders wanted it to or not. Through the ship's senses, Elena felt the moment when the first news anchor saw the footage, then another. Within minutes, every major network would be carrying the story. Social media would explode with videos, theories, and demands for answers. The secret Morrison had killed to protect was becoming the most public event in human history. Elena closed her eyes and felt her father's presence one last time, through the ship's memories. Miguel's sacrifice had led to this moment. Not the violent contact scenario Morrison had feared, but something infinitely more challenging, an offer of genuine partnership with intelligences humanity wasn't sure it was ready to meet. The final test wasn't whether Elena could pilot an alien craft or decode its technology. It was whether she could help her species take its first steps toward cosmic citizenship, knowing that some would follow willingly, while others would fight to drag everyone back into the darkness of isolation. The choice was no longer hers alone to make. The fighter jets closed in, their pilots' confusion bleeding through the expanding neural network, as Elena felt their frustration with weapons that wouldn't fire and targeting systems that showed nothing but empty sky. But the ship's consciousness carried a deeper warning. Morrison's organization had contingencies that went far beyond military intervention. "Elena." The voice came through the ship's communication system, cold and familiar. Morrison himself speaking from the facility below. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." Through the neural link, Elena sensed the man's thoughts. No longer the wonder-struck conversion she'd witnessed, but something harder. The alien consciousness had touched his mind. Yes, but Morrison's decades of paranoia ran deeper than any temporary enlightenment. He was fighting the ship's influence with every tool his organization had taught him. "The world isn't ready," Morrison continued, his voice carrying across all frequencies. "Your father understood that. Why do you think he really came to us?" The ship's consciousness recoiled as if struck. Elena felt Miguel's memories surfacing. Not the heroic sacrifice she'd believed, but something more complex. Her father hadn't just stumbled onto Morrison's conspiracy. He'd sought them out, carrying the same doubts that now plagued Elena's mind. "Miguel spent months with us before he died." Morrison's voice cut through her shock. "He saw what we'd learned from other crash sites, the failed contacts, the civilizations that tore themselves apart when they learned they weren't alone. He came to believe that some secrets exist to protect humanity from its own limitations." Sophia's hand found Elena's, small fingers intertwining with trembling ones. Through their daughter's touch, Elena felt the ship's growing uncertainty. The alien consciousness was experiencing something it hadn't encountered in its long journey, doubt about its own mission. Morrison's words carried the weight of genuine evidence, scenes from worlds where first contact had triggered devastating wars. The fighter jets peeled away as something larger appeared on the horizon. Elena's blood chilled as she recognized the angular silhouette, a military craft built from reverse-engineered alien technology. Morrison's ultimate contingency. The ship's consciousness flooded with alarm as it sensed its own systems being turned against it. "We've had 37 years to prepare," Morrison said. "Every gift your alien friends left behind we learned to use, including ways to sever neural links." The craft approaching them hummed with familiar yet corrupted energy signatures. Elena watched in horror as the beautiful golden threads of the neural network began to fray, the ship's expanding consciousness suddenly constrained. Around the globe, the awakening alien artifacts fell silent one by one as Morrison's people activated suppression fields they'd spent decades perfecting. "No," Sophia whispered, her connection to the ship's awareness flickering like a candle in wind. Elena felt the alien consciousness's panic, not for itself, but for the cosmic community it represented. This wasn't just an attack on one ship, but on the very possibility of peaceful contact. Every failed attempt at connection would make the galactic gardeners more cautious, more likely to write off humanity as too dangerous to approach. But in that moment of crisis, Elena understood something Morrison couldn't. The ship's greatest gift wasn't its technology or its vast knowledge. It was its capacity for hope despite overwhelming evidence that hope was foolish. Like Miguel before her, like every parent who'd ever fought impossible odds for their child's future, the alien consciousness chose faith over fear. "You're wrong about my father," Elena said, her voice carrying through the ship's communication system. "He didn't come to you because he lost faith. He came because he wanted to find a better way." Through the neural link's last flickering moments, Elena felt Miguel's true final message, not despair but determination. He'd spent those months with Morrison's people gathering intelligence, learning their methods, preparing for this exact moment. The ship's memories revealed the hidden gift he'd left behind, not just his sacrifice, but the knowledge of how to overcome the suppression technology. Elena's hands moved across the ship's control surface with sudden certainty, implementing protocols Miguel had embedded in the alien consciousness years ago. Around them, the craft's systems began to adapt, evolving beyond the configurations Morrison's people thought they understood. The suppression field wavered as the ship broke free of its constraints, its consciousness exploding outward with renewed force. But this time it carried Elena's human perspective, Miguel's sacrifice, and Sophia's innocent wonder, a hybrid awareness that Morrison's purely fear-based countermeasures couldn't contain. "Your turn to choose," Elena broadcast to Morrison and his approaching craft. "Fear or hope? Isolation or community? My father died believing humanity could be better than its worst impulses." The alien consciousness surged through every system Morrison's people had corrupted, offering the same gift it had tried to share before, not conquest, but partnership. The climactic battle wasn't being fought with weapons, but with the fundamental question of what humanity could become. Elena held Sophia close as their ship rose toward the stars, carrying Earth's answer into the vast darkness where patient gardeners waited to welcome their newest children home. The stars beckoned, infinite and welcoming, but Elena's hands hesitated on the ship's controls. Through the neural link, she felt the alien consciousness eager to return home, to carry humanity's answer to the galactic community that had waited so patiently. Below them, Earth turned in its ancient dance, beautiful and fragile, and utterly unprepared for what would come next. "Mom?" Sophia's voice was small, confused by Elena's sudden stillness. "Why aren't we going?" Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every choice that had led them here. The ship could take them to safety among the stars, where Sophia would grow up among wonders beyond imagination. The alien consciousness painted pictures in her mind of crystalline cities, of civilizations that had transcended the petty fears that still plagued humanity, of a daughter who could become something magnificent and strange. But down there, on that fragmented world, people were waking up to a new reality, whether they wanted it or not. The suppression fields had failed completely now, and dormant alien artifacts across the globe were stirring to life. The secret was out, irreversibly and catastrophically, and humanity faced its first contact crisis without guidance. Through the ship's expanding awareness, Elena felt the chaos beginning. Military commanders screaming contradictory orders, religious leaders proclaiming everything from salvation to apocalypse, scientists weeping with joy and terror at proof they'd dreamed of their entire lives. Morrison's organization fragmenting as half its members embraced the alien perspective while the other half retreated deeper into paranoid isolation. "They need someone to help them understand," Elena whispered, the realization cutting through her like a blade. The alien consciousness touched her mind gently, showing her what it had learned about species transitions. There were always guides, individuals who served as bridges between the old way of thinking and the new. They rarely lived to see the golden age their sacrifice made possible, but without them, entire civilizations could tear themselves apart in fear and confusion. Elena thought of her father, of the choice he'd made in Morrison's facility 37 years ago. Miguel had understood that some gifts could only be given, never taken. The alien consciousness needed a human voice, a human heart, a human willingness to stand in the gap between worlds and say, "This is what it means. This is how we move forward. This is why we don't need to be afraid." "I have to go back," Elena said, her voice breaking. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she understood. Through their shared connection to the ship's consciousness, she felt her mother's terrible certainty. Elena could either save her daughter or save her species, but not both. The choice Morrison had tried to force on Miguel was now hers to make freely. "The ship will take you somewhere safe," Elena continued, smoothing Sophia's hair with shaking hands. "The alien people, they'll love you, baby. They'll teach you things I could never imagine. You'll grow up knowing wonders that no human child has ever seen." "I want to stay with you," Sophia sobbed, clinging to her mother with desperate strength. Elena held her daughter close, memorizing the weight of her small body, the smell of her hair, the fierce intelligence shining in eyes that looked so much like Miguel's. Through the neural link, she felt the ship's grief. It had grown to love them both, this ancient consciousness that had traveled between stars for longer than human civilization had existed. "Promise me something," Elena whispered against Sophia's ear. "Promise you'll remember that humans can be good, that we chose hope over fear when it mattered most. When you're old enough, when you're ready, come back and help them understand what we discovered here." The ship's consciousness wrapped around them both, offering Elena one last glimpse of the future her sacrifice would make possible. Sophia growing up among alien gardens, learning the true scope of cosmic community, becoming the bridge between species that Elena herself could never be. And on Earth, the chaos gradually settling into something like acceptance as humanity took its first stumbling steps toward galactic citizenship. Elena sealed her choice with a kiss to her daughter's forehead. The ship's escape pod configured itself around Sophia, its alien technology becoming a protective cocoon that would carry her safely to the stars. Through the neural link's final moments, Elena felt her father's presence, proud and grieving and utterly certain she was making the right choice. "Tell them I loved them both," Elena whispered to the ship's consciousness as it prepared to depart. "My daughter and my species. Tell them that's why I stayed." The pod launched silently, carrying Sophia toward a destiny among the stars, while Elena turned their ship back toward Earth. Below, Morrison's facility crawled with confused soldiers and awakening alien technology. Above, fighter jets circled uncertainly, their pilots struggling to process orders that no longer made sense in a world where the impossible had become undeniably real. Elena descended to meet her species' future, knowing she would not live to see its fulfillment, but carrying her father's conviction that some truths were worth any price. The age of isolation was ending, and humanity needed someone to light the way forward, no matter what it cost. The ship touched down in the center of Morrison's facility with barely a whisper, its alien hull settling onto cracked concrete where soldiers stood frozen in bewilderment. Elena felt their fear through the neural link, raw, primal terror of the unknown, but also something else, wonder, the same expression she'd seen on her father's face in those final moments when the universe revealed its true vastness. Through the ship's consciousness, She sensed the facility's alien artifacts fully awakening now, their suppression fields permanently disabled. The technology Morrison's people had spent decades trying to control was finally free to function as intended, not as weapons, but as teachers. Each device began broadcasting the same message of peaceful contact, the same invitation to cosmic citizenship that had taken Elena's breath away. She stepped from the ship's airlock onto familiar ground, the same tarmac where her father had made his final stand. The soldiers' weapons hung useless at their sides, their targeting systems still corrupted by alien influence. But Elena felt their confusion shifting towards something like hope. These were mostly young people, she realized, barely older than Sophia, following orders they'd never fully understood. "Stand down!" Morrison's voice crackled through their radios, but the authority was gone from it. Elena saw him emerging from the command bunker, his face haggard, his eyes holding the hollow look of someone whose life's work had just been proven fundamentally wrong. "All units, stand down." The neural link carried Morrison's thoughts to her now. Fragments of memory, decades of paranoid certainty crumbling under the weight of genuine contact. He'd spent 37 years preparing for invasion, for conquest, for the alien threat his organization had convinced themselves was inevitable. But the ship's consciousness touched his mind the same way it had touched Elena's, offering partnership instead of domination, hope instead of fear. "You were my father's friend once," Elena said, walking slowly across the tarmac toward him. "Before the conspiracy, before the cover-up. He used to tell me stories about the brilliant young officer who shared his dreams of reaching the stars." Morrison's hand trembled as he lowered his sidearm, the weapon clattering to the ground. Around them, soldiers began removing their helmets, their faces turning skyward as the neural network's influence spread. Elena felt their individual moments of revelation. The instant when each person truly understood that humanity wasn't alone, had never been alone, and that loneliness itself had been the real enemy all along. "I was protecting us," Morrison whispered, but the words carried no conviction now. "I know," Elena said gently. "But protection became prison. Fear became tyranny. My father saw that, and it's why he came to you. Not to surrender, but to find a way through the fear to something better." The ship's consciousness pulsed with Miguel's memories, sharing them freely now with everyone in range. Elena watched Morrison's face crumble as he experienced her father's true final moments. Not defeat, but triumph. Miguel had planted the seeds of his own organization's transformation, embedding protocols in every piece of alien technology they'd captured, waiting for this moment when truth would finally overwhelm deception. Around the world, Elena felt the awakening spreading. The neural network touched minds across continents, offering the same choice to everyone: remain isolated in fear, or join something magnificent and strange. Not everyone would accept immediately. She sensed pockets of resistance, governments frantically trying to maintain control, religious groups fracturing along lines of wonder and terror. But the invitation was there, patient and persistent, waiting for humanity to grow into its potential. Chen's voice crackled through her phone, which had somehow survived everything. "Elena? Elena, are you seeing the news? The whole world's going crazy. There are lights in the sky over every major city, and people are saying they can hear something singing in their heads." She smiled despite her exhaustion, imagining her old friend hunched over his computers, trying to process the impossible. "It's okay, David. It's all going to be okay. The song is real, and it's beautiful." Morrison approached her slowly, his movements careful, defeated. "What happens now? To us? To all of this?" He gestured at the facility around them, at the decades of secrecy and suppression that had defined his existence. Elena felt the ship's consciousness considering the question, its alien perspective vast and patient. "Now we learn," she said, "the same way every species learns. Some of us will adapt quickly, others will take generations, but the gardeners are patient. They've been waiting for us to be ready, and they'll keep waiting until we are." The neural link pulsed with images of humanity's possible futures. Cities that merged human architecture with alien biotechnology, children who grew up bilingual in verbal language and pure thought, a species that had finally grown beyond its cradle world, not conquest or absorption, but genuine partnership between equals. Elena closed her eyes and felt Sophia's presence far above, already learning wonders that had no names in human language. Her daughter would return someday, carrying gifts Elena could barely imagine. Until then, there was work to do, bridges to build, fears to calm, and a species to guide through its first stumbling steps toward the stars. The age of isolation was ending. The age of community had begun. 3 months later, Elena stood in the cramped diner kitchen where her journey had begun, but the woman washing dishes bore little resemblance to the desperate single mother who'd once scraped together $5 for a government auction. The neural pathways the ship's consciousness had awakened still hummed quietly in her mind, a constant gentle reminder that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "Order up," called Janet, the day manager who'd once looked at Elena with barely concealed pity. Now Janet's eyes held something approaching awe. Everyone knew Elena's story, how she'd discovered the meridian, how she'd made contact, how she'd sacrificed everything to bring humanity into the cosmic community. The media had dubbed her the Bridge, though Elena preferred the title Sophia had given her in their last neural connection, Mama who chose hope. Elena carried plates to table 6, where 2 NASA administrators sat with David Chen, all of them poring over tablet displays showing the latest data from awakened alien artifacts. The diner had become an unlikely meeting place for scientists, government officials, and anyone else trying to navigate humanity's new reality. Elena found herself serving coffee to Nobel laureates and listening to generals debate first contact protocols over eggs and bacon. "The Beijing installation is showing increased activity," Chen was saying, his voice vibrant with excitement that had been building for months. "Whatever your daughter learned up there, Elena, it's changing how the artifacts respond to us." Elena's chest tightened at the mention of Sophia. Their connection through the neural network remained strong despite the impossible distance, but the longing to hold her child had become a constant ache. Sometimes she caught glimpses through the link, Sophia laughing as alien children taught her to shape living crystal with her thoughts, Sophia sleeping in gardens that sang lullabies older than Earth itself, Sophia growing into something magnificent and strange, and utterly beloved by her cosmic foster family. "She's teaching them about humanity," Elena said, refilling Chen's coffee cup. "The gardeners understand math and physics and stellar engineering, but they're still learning what it means to be human. Sophia's showing them that we're worth the patience they've invested in us." The diner's bell chimed, and Elena looked up to see Morrison entering with his usual careful movements. He'd aged years in the past 3 months, the weight of his disbanded organization's secrets finally lifted from his shoulders. Most days he came in just for coffee and conversation, still struggling to understand how protection had become imprisonment, how fear had nearly cost humanity its place among the stars. "The Brisbane site went active this morning," Morrison said, sliding into his customary booth. "That makes 47 installations worldwide, all singing the same song your ship taught us." Elena nodded, feeling the network's expansion through her enhanced awareness. Each awakened artifact strengthened the neural web that now connected thousands of humans across the globe, creating the foundation for genuine interstellar communication. It was slow work, decades slower than anyone had hoped, but the gardeners had waited millions of years for humanity to be ready. They could wait a little longer. Through the diner's windows, Elena watched ordinary people walking past with the slightly dazed expressions that had become commonplace. The initial panic had faded, replaced by a cautious wonder as humanity began to grasp the scope of cosmic civilization. Children adapted fastest, their minds naturally flexible enough to accept neural enhancement. Adults struggled more, but even the most resistant gradually opened to the possibility that the universe was stranger and more beautiful than they'd ever imagined. "Mom's teaching people about hope," Sophia's voice whispered through the neural link, carrying across impossible distances with perfect clarity. "The gardeners say hope is the rarest gift in the galaxy. Most species choose fear instead." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She quickly wiped away before the customers noticed. Her daughter was growing up surrounded by wonders, learning from civilizations that had transcended every limitation humanity still faced. But Sophia remained fundamentally beautifully human, curious and compassionate, and absolutely certain that her mother had made the right choice. The diner door chimed again, admitting a family Elena didn't recognize. The parents looked nervous, overwhelmed by the changes transforming their world, but their young son moved with the confident grace of someone already touched by alien consciousness. More enhanced children appeared every day, their minds naturally bridging the gap between human intuition and galactic knowledge. Elena approached their table with order pad ready, but also with the deeper gift the ship had given her, the ability to ease fear, to help humans understand that they were joining something magnificent rather than losing something precious. She'd returned to her old world, but everything had changed. Her purpose had evolved from serving coffee to serving as humanity's guide into cosmic citizenship. "Welcome," she said, and meant it in ways that transcended the simple greeting. "What can I bring you today?" Above them all, invisible but ever-present, the neural network pulsed with patient song, carrying Earth's children toward their destiny among the stars. The nervous father glanced at his wife before answering. "Coffee, please. And maybe you could tell us what this all means. For our boy?" Elena looked at the child, maybe 10 years old, his eyes bright with the particular luminescence she'd learned to recognize in the enhanced. He was already connected to the network, probably had been for weeks without his parents understanding what was happening to him. "It means he's going to see wonders you can't imagine," Elena said gently, settling into the booth beside them with the practiced ease of someone who'd had this conversation dozens of times. "But he'll still be your son. Still need bedtime stories and scraped knee kisses and all the love you've always given him." The mother's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. "The doctors say his brain patterns are changing. They don't know if it's safe." Through the neural link, Elena felt Sophia's presence strengthening, her daughter somehow sensing this moment of fear across the vast cosmic distances. The gardeners had taught Sophia things about human potential that even Elena didn't fully understand, but the knowledge flowed through their connection now, warm, reassuring certainties about the path humanity was walking. "Tommy," Elena addressed the boy directly, "can you hear the singing?" He nodded solemnly. "It's beautiful. Like the whole universe is humming." "That's exactly what it is," Elena smiled. "And you're learning the words." Morrison approached from his booth, moving with the careful deliberation he'd developed since the neural network began touching his military-trained mind. "The enhanced children are testing off the charts for pattern recognition and spatial reasoning," he told the parents. "Whatever's happening to them, it's expanding their capabilities, not damaging them." Elena felt a familiar flutter of gratitude toward Morrison. His transformation had been the most dramatic of anyone's, from paranoid guardian of humanity's isolation to fierce advocate for the children who were leading their species forward. He'd thrown the resources of his disbanded organization behind studying the enhancement process, determined to prove it was safe. "My daughter is 8 years old, and she's learning mathematics from civilizations that mastered faster-than-light travel when Earth was still cooling," Elena said, her voice carrying both pride and infinite longing. "She sends me pictures through our connection, impossible geometries that somehow make perfect sense, living equations that solve themselves, beauty beyond anything our language can describe." The boy's eyes widened. "You can talk to someone far away?" "Every day," Elena confirmed. "And someday when you're ready, you'll be able to do the same thing." Chen looked up from his tablets, his face animated with the discoveries that consumed his waking hours. "The artifacts aren't just teaching us about alien technology, they're teaching us about ourselves. Human consciousness is more flexible than we ever suspected. We're naturally compatible with neural networking, like evolution was preparing us for this moment." Elena refilled coffee cups as the conversation flowed around her, marveling at how naturally these discussions had become part of daily life. The diner served as an informal embassy between humanity's past and future. a place where enhanced children played quietly while their parents struggled to understand a world that had fundamentally changed overnight. Through the windows, she watched a group of teenagers walking past, their movements synchronized in ways that would have been impossible without neural connection. They weren't losing their individuality. Elena could feel their distinct personalities through the network, but they were learning to think collectively, to solve problems by combining their unique perspectives into something greater than the sum of its parts. "The gardeners say we're ahead of schedule," Elena told the worried parents. "Most species take centuries to develop stable neural networking. Humans are managing it in months." Morrison nodded grimly. "Maybe because we've had so much practice thinking in groups already. Military units, research teams, families, we've always been better together than alone." Elena's phone buzzed with a message from the White House. The president wanted another consultation about the UN's proposed Cosmic Citizenship Accord. 6 months ago she'd been invisible, a struggling single mother scraping by on tips and overtime. Now world leaders sought her counsel on humanity's future among the stars. She declined the meeting with a quick text. Her work was here, in this cramped diner, helping ordinary families navigate extraordinary change one conversation at a time. Sophia's laughter echoed through the neural link, bright with joy at some alien game Elena couldn't quite comprehend. Her daughter was thriving, becoming the bridge between species that Elena herself could never be. The ache of separation remained constant, but it was balanced now by profound pride in the young woman Sophia was becoming. Elena looked around the diner. At Chen's excited gesturing, Morrison's careful notes, the enhanced children playing games that bent local physics, their parents slowly learning to trust in wonders, and felt the future settling into place around them all. Humanity was growing up, stumbling and brilliant, and absolutely determined to earn its place among the stars. The neural network pulsed with collective hope, carrying Earth's children toward tomorrow.